own story and how we look at our lives and our own experiences of ups and downs, what's been great and what hasn't been great. So if you struggle with anything that has happened to you in the past and you still feel like you're carrying memories or difficulties of those times and you're still healing, this will help you to consider that even more and how you can approach that. Okay, so the card that we use with that is the moon. Just checking you've got the vision. That's a tendency. So the moon is like the sun is shines a light on everything, and the moon is pretty much what we can't see. Okay, so it asks us to explore the hidden truths, embrace our shadows, and honor our journey. It calls us to make peace with all that we've been and all that we are and all that we're becoming. So this is about radical self-acceptance. Your story, every triumph, every mistake, every messy middle is part of your power. The moon reminds us that we hide from ourselves. I keep having planes going over every 4 minutes. So this is about radical self-acceptance. So the moon reminds us that we hide from ourselves often holds the key to our healing. When you stop rejecting pieces of yourself, you begin to radiate a whole magnetic energy that changes everything. Owning your story is not about perfection, it's about truth. Owning your story is about not waiting until you've fully healed or are ready. Okay, you are worthy. Your story is not a liability, it's your legacy. So choose a moment from your past that you've struggled with to accept. And then consider whether or not you think it's possible to rewrite that memory from the lens of compassion, resilience, and growth. How did that moment shape you into who you are and what you are today? So the moon is what asks us to explore our hidden truths, embrace our shadows, and honor our journey, making peace with all that we've been and all that we are and all that we're becoming. So the affirmation for that is, my story is sacred. I own every chapter with love and courage. So I've got some journal prompts with this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is important to do. And before I do that, I'll share with you what the book and the song is that's recommended to go with this, because the idea of owning your story is quite a big one. So the book is Untamed by Glennon Doyle, a bold and beautiful memoir about claiming your truth, letting go of people-pleasing, and embracing the fullness of your messy, magnificent self. And the song is This Is Me by Keela Settle. So consider your story and think about what parts of your story are you proud of? Okay, what parts have you rejected or hidden and why? So that's the kind of stuff that goes in the shadow. How has your story shaped the person that you are today? How would you, like if you had to write your story, how would you write your story? What elements of your story of your whole life would you look at? Because sometimes when I'm working with clients, we start looking at the themes or the patterns that have emerged through your story. What would self-acceptance look like in your daily life? And how could that story help others? So I had a client a few years ago who they were going through a lot of issues at work and also was experiencing burnout. And they'd had some really difficult experiences in their early years of when they went to college. And some of the things that happened around that time was still part of their consciousness. And sometimes when we look back at particular times in our life, it can evoke feelings of shame and guilt and even a distorted version of events, especially if we've experienced depression. We know in psychology that our memory of the event isn't always accurate. And so we really need to sort of wonder that. And we can also carry those feelings for a long time about how we felt about the events that happened at the time. But shame and guilt is often part of the shadow. It's often hidden. We don't want to tell people about these things. So we can't necessarily change what happened in the past, or even go back and erase it. But we can use our mind and our visualization tools in some way. And there is a process in NLP called the rewind technique, and it uses the idea of timelines and going back in your mind to those periods of time and having a look at what are the aspects of that you find difficult, that were messy, that were difficult, that led to you feeling bad in some way. And then what did you learn about yourself from that time? We need to bring that learning forward. And then how can you come to terms with any of the shame or guilt or anything that happened at that time? Because you're not meant to carry it for years. You're meant to learn from it and then move on from that. And some people can even get to the phase of, say you've wrote down your whole story in a book, like a manuscript for a play. Then you can rewrite your manuscript. You can literally rewrite the story and make up new scenes about what happened. So if you felt a lot of depression, or things went on and people were mean to you, or certain things happened, you can change the outcome, and you can even imagine that those events didn't even take place. And we're not denying and dismissing and spiritual bypassing the stories, because initially you've got to accept the feelings that come with that and then work on processes to help clear any of the pain and trauma associated with it. But we can start to restore it. But we can also have a look at, what did we learn and what does that tell us about people or ourselves? So this is just really about introducing you to the idea of how you can rewrite a memory, a story, through the lens of compassion, resilience, and growth. So, for example, when my kids were young, one was in and out of hospital all the time, and the other boy was diagnosed with diabetes when he was about 4. And hopefully you can hear, we've got planes going over. And it was a very painful time watching the kids being sick and not knowing what's wrong with them, or having to try and administer injections and do their bloods, and now monitoring food, and it basically interferes with your life just operating in the way that most people's do every day. But it's really, really tough to see your kids in pain and going through that period of time, and you're in and out of hospital all the time. You have lots of doctor's appointments, you're having to stay on information, and your child's struggling with hypos and not feeling well, and now you're on alert. And I remember feeling on alert for a long time, of being worried in case something happened during the night. So there's no real way of rewriting that story. And at the same time, I have seen therapists and gone through some of the pain that I felt about what I witnessed and what we experienced as a family. And some of the mistakes I made at that time as well, and what I could have done differently, because sometimes we carry regret, about certain situations. But also, what did I learn about that? And when I later went and worked in schools, my boys were older by this stage. I think they were just heading towards teen years. I started working with a lot of parents, and I was able to really connect with parents that were also struggling with their children. Either the kids had education issues or health issues. And I was really able to relate with the parents and understand where they were at and what they were trying to do. And they were trying to do their best. And even the micro details of, say, like dyspraxia and dyslexia, of the strain that puts on the child and how that impacts their capacity to learn, but also how they feel and how that generates, low self-esteem underneath when they're struggling in school, or the dyspraxia, of how everyday things like, tiny shoelaces or carrying a plate, or, and they can drop things and spill things and don't have that hand-eye coordination, and how you have to try and explain those things to teachers who don't get it, who may not have that knowledge and that experience. So that became something I was able to really have some compassion for the parents that I came into contact with. And that made that more meaningful for me. Would I like to have not gone through that? Yes. Would I like for it to have been different? Yes. And my son to not have those experiences? Of course. Because a child, we know from Bowlby's work that if your child then ends up in hospital and they're hospitalized for a few days, a week, few weeks, and it was always a few weeks for us, that can be really traumatic for them. They're in a strange place. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of clanging about, all these strange doctors who were staring at them and talking about them. And that was really tough. And that can create trauma and impact attachment styles. And we know a lot more about attachment styles. So this is thinking about your own story and how you talk about your story. And is your story full of, exciting times and things that went really well? Or is a sort of a cloud that hangs over your life, like the clouds in the sky, creating a shadow over a lot of your experiences? And so through this process, you might also start to get memories of fun things that you enjoyed and fun times. So just consider this for a moment and think about, if you were to write your own story, what would that include? And then use the journal prompts of what parts are you proud. So I've done lots of things that I'm proud of. And what things did I hide and why? I hid a long time about how I was really struggling about when I was when the kids were small and trying to cope with all that. But sometimes at the time, we're just trying to get on with paying the bills, paying the rent, going to work, and also trying to support your kids and manage that in day-to-day life. So we all have these messy lives and things that have happened to us, that some of it was good and some of it wasn't good. But what is the story that you have about that? So this is just either introducing you to the idea or looking at doing story and journal work as a way of helping you process anything that is still around from that time period.